Hey, welcome. This is the video for the release of the 2022 Arterra Seven Oaks Vineyard Reds. We are talking right now and going into the fall of 2024. This is cool because there's some brand new things coming out this time, and I'm going to be as brief as possible, tell you all about it. Overall concept is we really are trying to just continue to find our flow and fit with natural processes. We already, obviously, most of you would know, go about that with the way that the grape growing is. It's very energetically upward growth during the springtime. And then once we hit the solstice, we try to encourage and capture that downward energetic growth from the canopy into the fruit and into the trunk and root systems for overwintering. And managing that dynamic is very important to shifting the vine towards quality of fruit production. And we do the same thing in the wine cellar with native yeast fermentations, truly minimalist techniques. Is really just trying to let nature express itself. And we're trying to further capture that characteristic and expression and philosophy as the wines evolve and are presented. So we just changed our release schedule. We did in April, we did more of a spring summery whites, crisper, brighter, fresher type wines that match that season and show best that time of year. And we are now doing that as we go into the fall season. So we're featuring the Seven Oaks Vineyard, which tends to produce reds that do have a little bit more of that really pleasant freshness to them that goes really well with the cusp transition as we go from hotter summer into still kind of warm early fall. And so these are wines that are really well suited to that moment in time and really pleasant. And then we're going to hold off on the like really dark, intense Arterra Estate Vineyard Reds to come out in January. So that's going to be a change, but that's, I think, going to be advantageous to those wines. So I think we're going to be doing a better job of showing all the right wines at the right time. So I think that will enhance everyone's experience. So this is kind of one more layer or closing the loop on that idea and philosophy. Then when we're talking about the Arterra Seven Oaks Vineyard site, and I want to keep saying it that way, and we're writing it that way in our information to prevent any confusion that it is not an Arterra site. It is actually owned by Mark and Madeline Skinner. It's in Philemont, Virginia. This is a relationship that I have had with this family and this vineyard as a dedicated vineyard site since 2005. So these are amazing people doing an incredible job. It is directly tied into Arterra, always has been, presumably always will be. Amazing relationship, really love it. So full credit to Mark and Madeline and being great partners to work with in producing top quality fruit. The site itself is what I call Piedmont, which means it's the rolling hills just east of the Blue Ridge Mountain, whereas our site that you see in the background is actually on the east slope of the Blue Ridge Mountain. So the estate is a mountainside planting. The Seven Oaks Vineyard is a Piedmont, which means a little bit richer, more fertile soils that traditionally can cater towards agriculture and productivity, but still really well drained. So they worked great for quality of fruit. The biggest difference is the elevation is lower. So we've had a little bit of an issue with certain varietals that can't quite handle the cold of the winter time there. So we've made some changes based on that. And that's a lot of what the matchup is getting the grapes, red grapes, in the right place to produce top quality wine. But we do find that there is site characteristic differences that come out in the wines. So when it's the whites, they tend to have really textured but fresh characteristic. We cross over with that fresh vitality when it comes to the reds also. But we definitely get a little bit more of a medium weight characteristic. Partially that's the varietals that are now planted there, but the site tends to cater that way to some extent. But definitely fresh, still great complexity, amazing flavors. We definitely get a enhancement of what I consider to be a floral characteristic expressing through reds. But the fruit flavors that come out are incredible. And I think that's what a lot of people really respond to. And I really do love and enjoy about that site. Very flavorful. And so, yeah, so we've changed some things, and new wines coming out with this flight will include the Frankish and Zweigelt. They were planted because it was colder site, and these are hardier varietals, so they were replacing where some other things got lost along the way. And just kind of matches up in evolution over the course of time and weather patterns and so forth. So as the world's changed, we're kind of changing with it. And it will be interesting to see, since we have some younger vines and their initial vintages coming out, exactly how that plays out in terms of subsequent vintages. We had seen, for example, with our Petit Syrah and the estate vineyard, that there is kind of a lighter characteristic in the early vintages, and then some more integrity and intensity and concentration cranks up over subsequent vintages. I don't know if it will be as extreme or not or what, but I kind of have a feeling that we're going to see these wines, amazing to start with, probably all the more impressive over a few years period of time as these vines evolve. And that's really cool to see and quite exciting. So then to jump right into this, we have 5 reds coming out this time. The fall release is not always going to be 5 reds, but it will focus more on the Seven Oaks site, which does include the Chardonnay, and future iterations of this will include the Chardonnay program, because it's also an awesome seasonal match for autumn wine drinking. But since we had 5 reds this time, we just kind of stuck with that theme launching this. So that's what we're doing. 5's a good number for one-time release. So first wine coming in, I'll show you. I don't know how good I am on the camera, is Frankish, which is also known as Limburger in Germany. So this is really cool. Awesome flavor, definitely distinctive. Lands in that medium weight genre, more similar to the Cabernet Franc. So it's a great accent and complement to that range of the flight. I definitely perceive this as having that more distinctively floral characteristic to it. It has a really pleasant, fresh brightness of acidity in it. Not overbearing, but definitely gives you that kind of like lighter, brighter, fresh note to it. So if that's the type of wine you're into, this is going to be awesome for you. So this is one of the Austrian varietals, so it is more cold hardy. Also, both the Austrians that we're going to talk about ripen earlier. So considering the Piedmont soils do tend to hold a little bit more water, this is a really nice attribute to get this type of fruit picked a little bit earlier in the season. So this is picking in September. So it's before we get too much of the volatility of that like wet hurricane type season or whatever that's going to be. So it really works really well. Definitely seems to be pretty hardy kind of varietal. Really nice wine, great flavors. I love it. Sandy loves it. I think everybody's going to like it. Second one is Cabernet Franc. Classic characteristics. So this is still made with 2 different clones of Cabernet Franc from the Seven Oaks site. One that is very dark and one that is a little bit less dark, a little bit lighter. 2 come together. Makes this really pleasant, medium weight red, all the classic characteristics of Arterra Cab Franc. That flavor is definitely hitting home as usual. Real balanced, real uniform, graceful, elegant. All the flavors are right. You got that little bit of violet, raspberry, classic Cab Franc thing going on. Real smooth. You do get just a little note of spice pepper coming in there. At least I do. But I think this is kind of a classic vintage. And overall, 22 is showing to be a really good vintage. Third one we got is Zweigelt. I know not everyone's heard of this one. This one's really cool. I love it. It is very dark, especially associated with still being more of a medium weight red. Because again, we don't do bleed offs or new oak or anything to try and intensify the wines. We capture their natural weight, balance, and character. So to be really dark, but not be overpowering is really an interesting and fascinating place to be. So this reminds me back to when we had Malbec, which is one of the varieties that the Blaufränkisch and Zweigelt replaced on that Seven Oaks site. This has all that like silk, velvet, graceful, elegant, smooth, textured, characteristic. So this is really, I think, pretty awesome. Zweigelt definitely has its own flavor that, again, I absolutely love. So I think this is just really intriguing, fascinating, again, to have dark without overly bold, intense, and heavy. Super cool. This is really the first one that picks for reds. So this actually comes in the early part of September. It is a magnet for birds and raccoons. So over at the Seven Oaks Vineyard, all the defenses have to go up really early. We learned that lesson the hard way the couple of years ago when the first little tiny bit of fruit was hanging out there in the vineyard, which was much better to learn when it was just a tiny bit of fruit hanging out in the vineyard as opposed to a whole lot of fruit. It definitely is attractive to the wildlife, and the characteristics that make it attractive to wildlife are because it smells good and tastes good. That's why we like it too. All right, so moving on to another vintage of Zero Petit Verdot, and to prevent confusion, it does say it on the bottle this time in addition to the little zero symbol that's right up there on the top. I'm really impressed with this one. Second iteration of it. Doesn't really have that little spritz that the first one had in its bottling. That kind of blew off. But this is just dark, elegant, complex, really interesting. Still a bit fresher and more approachable, for lack of a better word, but that word's used in the wine world, compared to the Estate Petit Verdot. So it's really pleasant drinking, really awesome. And I think this has gained a lot of interest, already having one vintage out. And this is a great one. So I think this is all steps in the right direction. So that wine, Zero Petit Verdot, zero means nothing added to it. So the summary or review is all the wines at Arterra are made with native yeast fermentation, native malolactic, no bleed off Saignée, no new oak, no finings, no additions, adjustments, additives, none of that, except super low level of sulfite applied, which is comparable to the way organic wines are all made and approved. And this works because we're bottled under the tight sealed screw caps, so we are protected from oxygen. So the difference from this one compared to the rest of the wines is, instead of a really low amount of sulfite addition, this is none at all. And there are ever so few wines made in the world this way. Even in the natural wine world, if you actually research and look into it and check the wines that you're buying and drinking, almost all of them have very, very, very low levels of sulfite added. What level depends on the wine, but there's so few that have none. It is quite a tricky thing to get the wines to land right where you want them. They swing more rapidly one direction or the other, without any use of sulfite. So it is a good tool in winemaking, and at low enough level, I consider it to be benign, but this is exploration of making wine with none. I'd be concerned doing this if I was bottling with corks, that the oxygen coming in would damage the wine, but we're protected with the screw caps. So that's the concept here. Zero just means nothing added. This is grapes. Everything else is grapes and sulfite, even at a low level. So fascinating, cool. I think you're gonna love that one too. And then we sum this up with Seven Oaks. And some of you have been around long enough to remember we in the past had Seven Oaks. This is totally different because the old version, and the reason we haven't had it for a while, is because it was a blend of Tannat and Malbec and Petit Verdot. And it was the Tannat and Malbec that died from winter damage that were replaced with the Frankish and Zweigelt. So it had made a Tannat-based blend. That's gone. So now we're using what we have, which is, this is a blend of Petit Verdot, Frankish, and Zweigelt. So not that the numbers matter specifically, but it's 38% Petit Verdot, 31% of each of the other two, Frankish and Zweigelt. Really awesome to just capture the overriding characteristic of the site. So this hits home that you have that wonderful vivid fruit flavor expression. You have that lean towards floral characteristics, at least that's how I perceive it, coming off of that site. Definitely more medium weight, definitely great complexity, definitely really pleasant drinking wine. Like, Absolutely love this. Think it's fascinating, super cool. And it's really cool to do individual varietals like we're presenting and then have one wine that blends to kind of overcome those individual characteristics of the varietals and show the overall characteristic of the site itself. So really excited about this lineup coming out. Really excited that we feel these are a better match to coming right off of the summer into the fall when you still have a number of those really hot days going on. And are we ready or are we not for like too intense of reds? This is awesome. So we're excited about it and hope you are too, and look forward to seeing you out here trying them out. Thanks.